Welcome everyone! For the ones of you who don't know me yet, my name is Zucconi. I'm a lecturer in artificial intelligence and a science communicator. And if this is the first time you're watching, a warm welcome to Gamedev Graveyard. This is the weekly show where we talk about games, postmortems, prototypes, and everything that is somehow related to the world of, well, game development. Now, if this is the first time you're watching, or if you've been seeing a few episodes already, please consider subscribing. As you can see, today we have a new setup, and you can probably see my new light reflected into my glasses. So my transition towards being a proper YouTuber is almost completed. So I think I'm officially able to say those kind of things. Now, today we're going to have a very relaxed chat, talking about game dev stuff. I don't think there shouldn't be any tricky subject that we're going to discuss. So if you're just looking to watch me and a guest talking about games for 1 hour or so, you're more than welcome to stay. And as always, feel free to leave a message in the chat. I see that there are a few people already in the chat. Feel free to leave a message and hopefully we will be able to address it. Now, with that being said, as always, I think it's time to introduce the guest that we are going to have today. It's Andrea Interguglielmi. He's the designer and developer behind Nauticrawl 20,000 Atmospheres. It's a game that recently landed on Steam, no pun intended. It's quite an interesting one, so I'm quite curious to see to talk to him about how he managed to design and develop this game. And he's also the creator of Clayxels, which I hope I pronounce it correctly. It's a tool to create smooth 3D models using a technology that is very similar to the one used by Dreams, the PS4 game, if we can say it's a game. And again, it's a tool that is growing quite rapidly. So I think that would be quite an interesting thing to talk as well. Now, with that being said, let me say hello. Hi, team. Hi, the Gamedev. And let me introduce you to Andrea. Hi, how are you doing?
Hello.
Come on, you have two Italian folks in the chat. Of course there's going to be drama, right? Thank you so much for your patience.
Just as I was saying, we can do all sort of complex stuff in shaders and Unity and whatnot, but then streaming technology will always get us. There's no way around it. It's too complex.
It's always ahead of us.
Yeah. So where was I? Nauticrawl first. That's my my first solo game project as an independent, which is always kind of a funky word because I'm not that independent really. I'm lucky enough to have a publisher, Armor Game Studios, that backed me on this project and continues as of today to support me on my projects, which is great. So kind of indie, and then Clayxels, which I guess we'll talk about later because I'm not sure which one is more weird, whether it's Nauticrawl or Clayxels. So Alan, feel free to start shooting questions so that I can unravel some of the mysteries of both
of your work.
Yeah.
So first of all, let me say that having an Italian surname, I share your pain. I know your pain.
Yours is super short, at least.
No, mine is short.
Yours is level 1. It's easy.
No. Mine is level 2 because he has the double C.
Yeah? Oh yeah, that's true. That's a tough one.
And that's a sound that British people don't know how to do, right?
Yeah.
So
I'm not gonna mock it in English, but I'm sure it sounds fine.
So I've seen my last name being misspelled and written in all Zucconi, in all possible ways.
Yeah. Well, I'm not gonna start saying all the ways my surname can be mangled up because that would take the whole episode. So I'll keep it to myself.
So something I wanted to talk with you, and I think it's quite interesting. You mentioned the fact that you're a sort of unusual indie developers. Not just because maybe your indie situation is a bit different from many like truly I'm making games from my bedroom indies, but also because you actually had a lot of experience before working on
Yeah.
Nauticrawl. I know you've been working for Lionhead on Fable, you've been working for DreamWorks, you've been working in California, Australia, the UK, France. So I think the first question is where all over is what made you decide to
The question is
why
why? Why
exactly?
are you what? Why?
You're sort of an Indian reverse. Why?
Yeah, yeah. I don't think the story is particularly unique. Actually, I think so. I My guess is there are many others out there um, called crazy enough to actually leave the comfort of the big office and the amazing salary and job security to actually pursue something that you just want to do out of passion. I'm sure I'm not that lonely in this spot. It surely is a weird decision and sort of a brave one to modern world standards, simply because what we need security, right? We need money to survive. So definitely going that way up the stream and then going back basically from where I started is quite a journey, because I did start as an indie. Actually, I did start as an indie when indie wasn't a term that we used, at least for games. Maybe for music it was already around. It was the year 2000 and something, 2001. So, and with another group of crazies called the Seventh Sense, we were making Game Boy games. We also had the PC division, so we were kind of cool. But we were mostly getting money out of Game Boy games, and I was pushing pixels around for a Game Boy. So that's the humble beginnings. Which, by the way, it's I would totally go back to that because it was super cool. But anyway, so from there, um, one thing leads to another, and I'm in UK working for Lionhead, mostly as a technical artist though. So I'm kind of at that point migrating the my job from pixel art. I was doing also 3D graphics onto what's my current fixation back in 2005-ish, which is animation, procedural rigging, tools, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm working on Fable 2. And I'm in Lionhead, so it's like the dream. It's fantastic. I see legends passing by. They probably don't even know who I am, don't even remember me. But I did see these guys passing by in the office. I was like 20 something, and it was amazing. It was a great time because we were all experimenting, all coming up with different things that nobody had done before. It was great. And once again, one thing leads to another, and I'm tired of the games industry and I move on to the VFX and movie industry. I first passed from NPC, which is close by, it's in London, and from there I move to Australia, Animal Logic, and then I go to California in DreamWorks. And I'm still making movies and I'm still doing research on procedural animation and all that. And it's great. Of course, money is good and job security is the best and is fantastic, but I tend to have this kind of ideas that the ones that grow, I'm sure you know about that, the ones that grow too big to keep in your brain, and then you got to take them out and actually do them. And so I have this issue that I have to do the stuff that grows in my mind. At some point I just need to sit, and so I leave these big offices, the nice life, California. I do still miss the waves, and I'm back home. That happened quite a few years ago at this point. And just like anybody else that goes indie, the struggle starts. It's we know how it is once you leave those big offices. At least the people that have followed the same path. There's a lot of insecurity, anxiety. Anxiety becomes like your best friend. That's always there, patting you on the shoulder, reminding you that it's there. And at some point, while I'm teaching Unreal Engine for a school in Turin, I have yet another thing that grows too big and I need to see it, and that's Nauticrawl. Only this time, Nauticrawl gets noticed, and I start getting emails from publishers. And one of these publishers is the one that I already mentioned, Armor Game Studios. And that's where the story becomes lucky. And it becomes one with a happy, I would say ending, but it's kind of a continuum at this point because we're still working together, we're still doing a few things. And so that brings us to present time. Nauticrawl is basically what has kept me busy for the last almost 3 years. If we consider it's been a side project for about 1 year and then slightly more than 2 years working on it, doing the actual game and then stuff.
I think it's quite interesting because, as you said, you need to be very brave to do the sort of jump that you have done. But I feel that what probably makes your situation different is the fact that at that point, you already have a lot of experience on how to make stuff. You've seen how studios deliver stuff. So in a way, yes, you're an indie, but you're an indie with experience, if that makes sense. And this is something that...
Yeah. It's not the usual. Back in the days, it used to be, well, back in the days, it's like just a few years ago when the indie movement started, it would have mostly be people just grabbing Unity and going off crazy and doing amazing stuff. And then we started seeing schools popping up. And of course, people tend to have quite a good formation nowadays. So that surely helps a lot. My graduation was basically working in those offices, and then when I approached work as a solo developer, at least I had all the amazing experience, all those things that I've learned from some of the best people in the industry. I had it part of my experience, and that helps me even today, because I've seen how people are sort of managed. It's a bad word, but you need a bit of discipline when you do this job, especially as a solo developer. So I've seen what it takes, the amount of hours that you got to put in. I didn't expect, of course, that those hours would double as you start working as a solo developer, but I sort of knew what I was going into, and I knew how to manage myself because I've seen other people managing myself. So, and of course, the technical side is something that I just carry along. So that part is funny enough, but that part is the easy part. The hard part is managing my time, managing all the different things that a solo developer has to do. But again, on that, I'm really, really lucky because of Armor Games that takes care of pretty much, I would say, anything else that falls outside of the creative development of my game, which is, again, let me say that yet one more time, is a very, very lucky position for an indie developer to have.
I think it's a position where I wish I had been when I started making indie games, because for me, it sort of happened, things sort of aligned and bam, it happened. And at the time I was like, am I ready for this? And so I started making games without really having the experience necessary to make those games.
And that's the best. That's the best way to dig in.
Ask my psychiatrist. I don't think it was the best. But no, I'm joking, but it was very intense. And I think that I made a lot of mistakes that I probably wouldn't have made if I knew if I had worked in a studio before. So I think that this was, quite a good position in which you were. And I remember that I was talking about this with Mike Bithell And it was really supportive when I had my first game coming out. Actually, it wouldn't have happened without him, actually. Um, we were chatting about, how he made Thomas Was Alone, and he said something that really stuck with me, and it was that, oh, Thomas Was Alone is not my first game. It is, in a sense that it's the first name with
Exactly,
it's the
yeah.
first game with my name on it, but it isn't the first game I worked on. And he had a
And
similar experience to yours, where he has been working in studios before. So he managed to get all that knowledge, all that experience to make mistakes not on his games. And so when he released something, he knew all those mistakes and he managed to avoid them. And I think it's such a good position to be in if people can afford
and
it.
I guess it is because in a way because then I made still all sort of mistakes on Nauticrawl, like everything. You like if this was the room to take, like the possible mistakes to make, I took it all. I filled completely all the room that I had available for making crappy decisions and whatnot. But that's part of the process. I think one thing that is amazing about this game, there is a curse, but it's also fantastic, and I can dig into that later if you want, why I think it's fantastic. But the point I'm trying to make is every game you're going to make is completely different and it will have a whole bunch of challenges that you've never tackled. So yeah, I did see productions, big productions before, even though when you're in big productions, you work on very tiny pieces of the puzzle. So now all of a sudden, not only you're making an experimental game, you are making your first solo game and it's a new game. So you can even scrap everything I said before and just leave. It's a game. Every time you will make a game, there will be all sort of mistakes to be done, and most likely you will do it. You will do them. And the reason why I think this is great is that on one hand, it makes our job very stressful.
Indeed.
It's it's tough, but on the other hand, um, it's very hard to put this job into numbers, which is, for my kind of nature, is something that really, really keeps this kind of job exciting and the one that I want to keep making quite possibly for the rest of my life. The fact in the big offices, at some point, they will run some numbers, how long that kind of task takes, how long to make a model, how long to make that kind of effects. Chopping a guy's head off, making a waterfall, making a bunny, making a dog. All these things initially were all big unknowns in the movie industry, in the game industry. And then at some point, some people have been starting to run numbers. And by now, they sort of know quite precisely what it takes to make each one of these things, which is great. It's what makes these big productions slightly less risky. They're still risky, they're still incredibly complex, but now they're manageable. For us working in these big offices, it just means we are a bit more micromanaged, which is not a bad thing, not for everybody, but that's how these companies have to survive, right? They by now they know how long it's going to take you roughly to complete that task. Going back to indie development, experimental games, or even just making another Metroidvania that just has one slight twist in the gameplay, it's a big unknown. It's unknown for yourself because you've never done a Metroidvania before. You've twisted slightly the gameplay, so you've introduced a massive unknown into this project that nobody has ever done before. So it's not like you can go and Google what how long it's going to take. You have no idea. And this is going to keep this job fresh and exciting and thrilling and stressing quite possibly forever until you get AI possibly solving some of these problems. I don't know. This is sort of sci-fi talk. But for now, it's all a big unknown. Every project you tackle as an indie developer is all full of questions, and that's great for who who tries an approach working at a computer in a very creative way. So that's the part that I love. Of course, I don't like the anxiety and everything else that comes with it, but that's
Who
the
does?
price.
So
That's the price.
we've been mentioning Nauticrawl quite a few times. So do you want to talk a bit about the game, what it is, what makes it special, how did it came about?
So yeah, I was mentioning Nauticrawl has been a spare time project for about 1 year. The way it came about, I think I was in Turin riding on a tram. I was coming back from having taught a class on Unreal. And I was in one of those trams that they have in Turin that is the vintage model. So it was pretty much empty, and I was sitting right next to the driver, not next, that's illegal, but behind. And I would see him cranking the levers, pushing buttons, and I was there sitting and thinking, that's totally a game, and it's kind of cool. But that idea fell in the back of my mind for quite a while until one evening we watched with my family 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And so that went into the same buffer along with the tram idea, right? It was piling up. It was still not quite a game yet. And then one day I watched for yet another time, so one more time, I watched Dune by David Lynch. And at that point, this completely screwed up triangulation of Dune, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and a tram in Turin somehow formed a game. I had the aesthetic that I wanted to borrow from Dune because I think it lends itself very well to PC games. And I had the narrative from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, all the marine theme, and the game was the tram. So I started converging those three impossible things together, and I started just punching in code with Unity. And initially, it was nothing more than a bunch of gouges and buttons. And the prototype had no graphics. You had only the systems. And you could move the machine around. And I sort of felt like there was something in there because I have zero, like, I don't know up until I try if my own idea is fun or not. And that's also part of what makes this job sort of hard, at least for me. Maybe there are other people that can totally visualize a gameplay, put it onto code, and bang, it just works. For me, is all a big question mark. So sometimes, most of the time, I would prototype a game and it sucks. This time, I did prototype the game and it didn't suck. It was kind of funny. I mean, fun. It's funny that it actually works. So one thing leads to another, and I keep working on it in my spare time. And then at some point, I quit my job again. So I stopped teaching, and I take this prototype out of the drawer. It had been sitting there for a while at this point. And my thinking is, I will share it finally, because I don't have another job that sort of pulls me in other directions. So I will give it one shot. I will put it on Twitter, and whatever happens, if nobody cares about it, I think I can sort of wrap it up in a couple of months into a tiny game to publish on my own, so real indie. And so I was prepared to do that. And I think that's the one advice that I keep giving to people to date is try and think about your projects in layers or steps or milestones that you confront with yourself to begin with. So if you really want to try and wrap up something to show to a publisher, rather than doing that and then getting depressed if nobody answers your call, just try and conceive a project that can be that demo that you show, that pitch that you show to the publisher. Why not making that a game that people can play? I mean, win-win, right? The publisher doesn't care about your game. You can still publish it on itch, and at least you get some visibility, and you can start over with another project. And that's what I wanted to do with Nauticrawl. It was ready to be wrapped in a small experimental game to go on itch, probably with a very disastrous launch, which is my style. Um, and end of story. Instead, a few publishers came forth, and he made a splash of news on a few websites, well-known websites, which was great. And then from that, I got contacted by publishers, and with Armor Games, there was some incredible clean communication. You have to frame my previous experience with publishers as 2000 era, making games for Game Boy, which means incredibly risky for publishers. Me as a 19 years old guy, backed by my partners, which back then were sort of in their 30s, but still, I was a kid going to talk to other publishers, or mostly just listening to the publishers. The other guys were doing the talking, but still, they were intimidating. Back in 2000, publishers would wear a suit most of the time and talk to you in a way that, it's gonna give them the best deal. You are a resource. I'm not gonna say that they were bad people and nothing like that, but it was a tough time, right? You are at a table talking business, you are a kid, and those people have to put up front a massive amount of money to publish that cartridge, which needs to be physically made. And then it has to go on a ship, and then it has to be shipped to shops that have to buy it. So it's kind of another deal that now we barely remember, but it was a big deal. And so I'm used to talk to those guys. Those are the publishers I remember. So when I start getting communication from publishers in 2018, it was, I'm kind of scared that it's going to be like that, like it was. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to talk to these bad guys at all. And communication went forth with Armor Games, and yeah, they were totally not those guys. I mean, we usually don't talk with the webcam on, so I don't know if they're wearing a tie, but I'm pretty sure they're not. So it's been very friendly. They are very friendly, and that helped me a lot, because I'm not the kind of person that likes to deal with the business type of person. I'm not a businessman. I barely know what I'm doing now. So if somebody gives me a good sign that they just want to take care of me and what I'm doing, that's what I need to feel relaxed and just focus on the game that I'm trying to make. So that's about the story for Nauticrawl, the initial part. Everything else is an amazing roller coaster of trying things, failing badly at trying things, and then trying again, and then coming up with what Nauticrawl is today, which is a sort of filtered experience of the intricate, complex machine that used to be in the very first prototype. It was way harder, way messier. So the challenge with this game, I guess, has been really taking it from wonky prototype, weird, what is this thing, to it's a game. And every time I talk about this stage, I have to mention Sean McKenzie, which is the producer on this game, and he's one heck of a game designer. And I had him over my shoulder luckily, to consult with. And so together we sort of made it into a game. It wasn't easy because, again, it wasn't quite a game. And I'm not saying it's quite a standard game now, but at least it's something that people are enjoying. And we had amazing reviews. Of course, we were scared when we released it because it was much more of a game that he started than when he started, but it was still experimental. You die a lot in this game. It takes you to the brink of just smashing your monitor. So you had a lot of risky points. And the fact that you only see this one screen most of the time also makes it kind of hard to market. So it was a challenge for all of us. And by the time that we released and we started getting the first few reviews, we were like, whoa, people are liking it. Amazing.
So
that's unexpected. No, we were hoping for it, of course, but we knew it was sort of uncharted territory. So we knew we couldn't expect anything. Everything could have happened. Luckily, people liked it, and the press liked it.
It's a great game, so I mean that's good. So we have already a few messages in the chat. So let me say hello to hi team, hi Codadev, hi Itabubu, hello Mauro Franchi, Kauli Owl, what else? Ahmed, hi all. So we have a question from Tim. Tim is asking question for Andrea. What is your view of skeuomorphism versus flat design, and how did you go about building an intuitive interface for Nauticrawl?
About the intuitive interface, that was the hard part because it's not meant to be intuitive. It's meant to put an obstacle in the form of a puzzle in front of the player, and it's meant to be disclosed progressively, almost like an escape room kind of game. But at the same time, that part, the genius idea was to make that also the tutorial to actually play the rest of the game, which, without spoilers, is sort of a top-down roguelike-ish dungeon crawler experience. So the interface is not meant to be intuitive, it's meant to be a puzzle, and it's meant to be also your tutorial. How did we go about that? I just remember nightmares, to be honest. Testing early. I've been asked by Armor Games to test the game. Armor Games has been testing the game, so they have been playing the game. They have been giving me feedback, which is great. And every feedback that I received was like this punch in the stomach, in like stuff like, it's not fun yet. I'm dying a lot. Maybe people are not gonna like it yet. So it was hard to swallow. And iterations. I didn't have many references to follow. I did look at other games for sure. The problem is that I wanted to mesh those games together, so I couldn't quite follow any precise formula. Now I know I'm getting around the question, but that's because I don't have a game designer formation. So those principles that you mentioned, I know nothing about. I don't know game design by the book. I just knew that I wanted to make this thing. In my mind, I had X-Wing, the flight space simulator, which I grew up playing as a kid, and I love it. And it's coming back now from EA, and it probably is going to ruin my life. I'm not going to make games ever again because I'm going to just play that. Then I had this revelation, more than a game, which is a dark room, which is this textual adventure. Somebody has called a clicker game, and at some point it turns roguelike. It's narrative, and it's a simulation, and it's all text, and it made my mind explode with possibilities around text. So you will find that in the monitors of Nauticrawl, and also the whole idea of marrying narrative with roguelites, and the idea of completely shifting morphing literally the gameplay as the game happens. And then what else? There was some the room, of course, in there, the escape room game. And then after Nauticrawl was a thing, people started mentioning other games that might have been a good reference, but I didn't know about them back then. One is Santa Ragione's Mirror Moon, which when I looked at it, I fell off my chair because I was like, whoa, this looks like a slicker, more stylish version of Nauticrawl, but it's completely different as far as I've seen. I still have to play it, which is embarrassing, but it does look amazing. So do look it up. And then I've been told the game has some elements from Myst, which I still have to play. But of course, I know Myst. So because it's a big Duskers, and then In Other Waters came in, and I also mention it a lot on my Twitter because it's like we are twins from parallel universes. We both used me and Garrett, we both used similar expedients to actually try and render a world that is big, but you only see a tiny fraction of it, which is what makes these kind of games doable for solo indie developers. So, and Adam Sandler's Capsule, that's another game that was brought to my attention after. So turns out Nauticrawl is not all that lonely in this weird ocean of weird games. There are others. But I guess we all went free blind into the process. So I'm sorry if that completely doesn't answer the question.
No. I think it's fine. We also have a question from Maro asking about the testing. How much testing was manual versus automated?
Zero automated. I hate myself for that. There is this one guy that we call the machine or the beast or the kraken, Ivan. He works in Armor Games, and he's been testing Nauticrawl since the start. And by the end of the game, he almost knew how it was programmed without having ever seen the actual code. Like literally, he mapped every single possible scenario where you can soft lock the game, hard lock the game, all the permutations. And this game is tiny, but it has crazy amount of permutations. Everything that you do sort of changes the experience slightly. So basically that means a lot of things can go wrong. And as I was going through all of that, I was hating myself for not doing any automated test. And yeah, I still wish I knew how to do that. I still don't know what's the best way to go about automated testing with a game like that. I've been told that definitely I needed to make my game way more data-driven than it is. We're talking, you press a button, and if the light blinks, it sends an event that probably unlocks a part of the story. This is how bad it is programmed. So it's one of those cases of duct tape all over the place and a lot of good testing, which was crucial, but it was all manual. And that's kind of a dualism that happens inside my brain. Like I'm a techie guy, and I tend to be very techie when I do stuff like systems, interfaces, tools. But when I do games, I try and go with the flow, which sucks when you need to maintain the code, but it's great while you are there and getting the game in front of you and assessing your own ideas. So I would love at some point to strike a good balance, and I definitely would love to find a good testing framework that allows me. I want to go the lazy way about this. I I want a framework that where I can record somebody playing and then integrate the mouse and keyboard input as part of the test units. That's how I want to go about
That
it.
sounds very
I just don't.
dangerous.
Yeah, it's gonna break all over the place. It's gonna be impossible to adjust and refactor as you go. So I don't know. I didn't strike. I'm gonna wait for artificial intelligence on that before.
So now that you mention that, actually, there's an amazing talk by the folks who developed the Talos Principle. You know, the game with the
Yeah,
robot doing puzzle thing, the portal with the robots.
yeah,
And basically, what they've done, they had these sort of simple AI that could play test a game from beginning to end, and it didn't. This AI basically wasn't just a pre-recorded player, but he knew I have to put the box from here to here, so I'm doing pathfinding from here to here. So it was basically playing the game by knowing where objects should go, basically, and it was doing automatically. So in like 5 minutes, they could test the entire game and see if they broke any part, because it was like, oh, now the eye can pathfind to here because we change his wall, or now we don't have a key, or I don't remember, you don't have a laser gun or something. And I feel that was like the idea of doing that. So much technology. I was absolutely in love when I heard that.
It's fantastic. It's all about having the right. I'm not gonna find excuses. It's not about finding the time, the budget. It's about having the right mind. I think Jonathan Blow is probably the kind of guy that approaches his games like that, and probably has a much easier life during testing and refactoring stuff than I have. But it's I guess you can do that when you are a very, very good game designer and in your mind you have everything clear, so you're working on a game that behaves as you expected, that is fun. But if you are anybody else, if you're not Jonathan Blow, probably you don't know how your game plays until you've coded your idea. And what that means is that you're basically always late, because you're implementing something that is scheduled. We're talking, milestones, or that kind of situation, or even being, completely indie. You don't have a publisher, but still, you have a rent to pay. You gave yourself a budget. Most realistically, you're gonna be behind schedule forever, testing stuff that you don't know whether it's fun yet. On the other hand, again, if you're 100% sure about what you're doing, then yeah, it's fantastic. You can spend time implementing while implementing the unit tests for what you're doing, and blah, 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 blah. In my case, it's like this big mess that gets crammed there, tested, it breaks, I check it in half, throw half of it away, and then restart from scratch until the game ships. That's pretty much how I approach it.
So in the meantime, we have a few more people coming to watch the show. Hi, Harry. Harry says, "Oh, I'm late. Lovely and inspiring work, Andrea."
Thank you.
Harry has also been a previous guest of the show, so you might find his episodes in the playlist that hopefully will appear somewhere around. I will try to put it somewhere around.
I will watch it for sure.
So there's another question I wanted to ask you. So you've been talking about playtesting and the fact that you had, a lot of help from Armo Games, checking on the possible outcomes of the game, and I think that is definitely one way of doing playtesting, as in checking how solid the game is, because effectively you might have bugs. It's a very complicated game with a lot of events that have to, go and click at the right time. So I can see a lot of things could go wrong, and definitely there's a need to playtest a lot of that part of the game. But there's also another part of the playtesting for this kind of game that probably is even harder. So for the people who just arrived, basically Nauticrawl has this almost unique, or at least very rare, design aspect where there's no tutorial. not traditional tutorial. You have to die a lot of times to learn how to play the Nauticrawl, basically. To learn what every lever does, what every button does, and how not to eject yourself, how not to consume the battery, and not to have everything explode. And this, to me, poses a big challenge because you can only have that experience once. In the sense,
Yeah.
if you send this to playtest to someone, once they've had that experience, they cannot playtest the game again and experience this first time emotion.
You've nailed, yeah,
How do you
Alan,
do it?
you've
How do you
nailed
work with that?
it. That was the part of the real nightmare. At some point, imagine this, at some point, I'm already completely biased on the first prototype. So I'm not seeing any of the fun part anymore. I can't. So I've run out. By the time I signed the publishing deal, I've also run out of friends. But the
Literally.
publisher is, but Armor Games is bringing in new life, so that's great. If not, that after a few months that we are in production, they stop seeing the game as well. So what happens at this point is that we go into public beta with all of us, everyone who knows me, with pre-confident playing this machine. So we've run out of fresh meat to use as testers. So we go into public beta confident, but we also knew that some people might struggle, and people start dying like flies. Literally, nobody can finish the demo. Most of the messages says, rage quit, rage quit, rage quit. A couple of geniuses managed to finish the demo. We should have sent them gifts or something, because back then the game was real time. Now, you might not realize playing the game in its final form today, and it's sort of spoilery, but really not that much. But if you don't move, nothing moves. This is justified by the premise.
It's proper
You are moving
roguelike. It's old school roguelike.
Yeah, but it's not told to the player. You don't know it. So we also have some people that try and that feel like they're being chased by monsters when really the moment they stop moving, nothing moves. You still hear the monsters roaming around you. So it's still creepy, and it kind of urges you to make your next move. But if you got the nerves, you can just stay still and nothing will attack you. It has become over time more of a game of strategy, which is what I always wanted to do, but it was the hardest thing to pull off. So initially I went to public beta with a real-time game. For some reason, the strategy part was lost in the process. And so people had to learn the machine, which is fine. Initially you die, you restart, but it's just an iterative process. But at some point, as you start learning the machine, you start piloting it around. And that's when you meet the monsters and the turrets trying to shoot you. And at that point, the initial iteration of the game that went into public beta would see the players having to maneuver this machine in real time as fast as they could while the machine is blinking all over the place, making sounds, trying actively to kill the player because you are stealing this thing. That's the whole point. You are stealing this thing that you are not meant to be piloting. You want to get out from something, from a bad situation, likely the game doesn't tell you initially, and you are trying to escape, you steal this thing, and all of a sudden everything is blinking and you're about to die. If you play now, you will have all the time in the world to assess your next movement and strategize.
So let me ask you a question about this. Because while I play the game, I realized the sort of turn-based elements. Let's go with that of it, I realized, okay, my situation is stable, I can do everything I want now. But it took a long time to get there because when I start a game, if I turn on the battery, basically if I turn on the Nauticrawl, the battery drains as in
Yeah.
like 30 seconds. I don't know how long it is. And so in a way, yes, but you're actually you're lying to the players in a way, because you're telling them that it is real time, and then it is not real time, but it is real time when you start. How?
To get out of the initial mess of making the Nauticrawl an escape room game in itself, I needed to oppose a challenge. And that challenge initially is plugging the battery to the engine so that the engine will start recharging the battery. Now, the fun, geeky aspect about all of this is that internally the machine is a machine. The machine is really pumping steam and really checking electricity and really sending signals around. Like, it's literally working. So if you haven't turned on the computer, you can turn on the radar, but the radar will not show some stuff. I'm not going to spoil, but so it's all like that. And that's why the tester went completely nuts, because everything can be done concurrently. So the permutation of this thing are crazy. And if you take those permutations across all the stages during the story of the game, they keep multiplying. And that's the technical aspect. As you mentioned, the initial barrier to overcome was, is this thing fun, or is it just plain frustrating? And I'm not gonna lie, it's a divisive game. Some people will try it and go like, not my thing, and they will close it and ask for refund.
And some people have. Let's not make names. Some people have.
Some people have, yeah. They ask for refund. They leave us lovely reviews that I couldn't have ever hoped for, and they do ask for refunds as well. So it's we didn't expect to just come out of this completely, fine, and make something that is for everybody. The game clearly isn't for everybody. It didn't start like that. It started as an experimental game, and we've been putting a lot of energies to actually open up the game mechanics to as many people as possible. But there's no way the casual gamer, of the one that gets easily frustrated, is gonna endure. We have heartwarming stories from people that told us, it's not my kind of game, but it hooked me to the point that I overcame my frustration. And that's the best compliment that I received with this kind of game. But I am aware that it's not going to be for everybody. Some people are just going to rage quit, refund immediately. But that's fine.
So something you were talking about, playtesting the game, and because that's a big part of, I guess, my job, even as a lecturer, unfortunately. One question that I'm quite...
It's a tough job.
I know, right? One question that I'm quite interested to know your opinion is that in the games, every button has a function, but you don't know it, right? And there are a lot of combination and things that are sort of there, but because you don't know how they work, they're all mysterious. So how do you know when something goes wrong? As in, if you're a player and you play in this game, how can you know if it's a bug or if it's a feature? So is it the problem that you never got any bug? I mean, unless the game crashes, obviously. But if it doesn't crash and the logic is just a bit broken, you will never know. Because it's like, oh, maybe I didn't press the level.
Yeah, that was my life for about 1 year. For the whole year of development, that was my life. People asking me if they bumped into a bug. I'm not talking about the released game. Fortunately, we don't have that anymore in the release game. But as the programmer of the game, I've been dealing with, hey, that's a bug. No, it was a feature.
You're not playing well.
Yeah, you're not playing well. So I had that a lot, and again, it was iterations, finding the right moment to give the player a bone. And the game does that. It will try and hold your hand when you think that the game is broken. Like, hey, I've tried this before, so it's not doing what I think, so I clearly is broken. At that very point, usually, there is a blocking moment. There are very few blocking moments in this game because I believe those are the moments that sort of remind you more of a proper game, you know? In this game, there's no pop-ups saying, hey, you've done this. Hey, congratulations, you've killed your first turret. No. Instead, there are blocking moments where the machine freezes and the computer sort of takes your face and forces it in front of the monitor, going like, hey, I cannot go on. I need you to perform this task for me so that you can. There is always a different excuse in the game to get the player into that blocking moment where I force the player to learn a lesson. But those moments always come after the player had the liberty to try first on his own and had that initial sensation of, I'm lost, I don't know what happened. Oh God, I'm about to restart, but I know I'm gonna die again. And at that point, we try and catch the player at the very last moment, and we block the machine, and we find an excuse to teach a lesson, just one tiny lesson to the player. And the game will do that a few times for those that really struggle. So yeah, of course, getting to that, catching the player right at the verge of him going like, that's a bug, the game is broken. All those moments happening at the right time required a lot of souls dying a lot in this game and telling me why and when and how. But mostly it was just even. So our tester in Armor Games, most of the stuff was just him.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
So I actually discovered about this game because I asked people around. So I was working on a prototype, one of my 15,000 prototypes.
Yeah, you told me about those.
Yeah,
they're actually pretty good.
I told you about like 3 out of 15 million. But now I was working on. Actually, it's a prototype I showed on the show, like at the very beginning, before I had guests. So I wanted to make this game where basically it was sort of rip-off from Mirror Moon that you mentioned from Santa Ragione. And you had this sort of like magical spaceships that you just have the controllers and nothing else floating around, you know, sort of like super high tech. And I was like, guys, can you send me videos of games where you don't know what you have to do? And people send me Nauticrawl, and I was like, that might be interesting. And then I see actually you on another show talking about a game with Mattia Traverso. And I remember that Mattia will start playing the game and he started getting the hang of it. And I was like, no. Well, not much, but I closed the show immediately and I bought the game because I was like, I can't watch this without spoilers on how it works.
But Mattia is a brilliant game designer, so he told me like, here you could have done this and that. It's a bit like when you told me like, yeah, but the battery initially is misleading because you're teaching the players real time, but then it's not. And this is all the beautiful, messy stuff that went into this game. It's me as a known, properly trained game designer just doing stuff, and this is what happens. It creates sort of a chemical reaction that is really unstable but fun at the same time. That's how I justify my ignorance to myself.
Well, I mean, I think it's a very good game, so I'm glad that all this suffering led to.
Sometimes, it's the stuff you do without much of a background, like, if you do a Metroidvania these days, you find plenty of talks and you know how to play it by the book. So when you start doing something different, again, the problem is that you're not going to find those books. But these kind of happy accidents can happen. Stuff that it's not quite right, but it's entertaining.
And to be honest, I think that probably Nauticrawl will remain as one of the first games to get really popular to being able to do the kind of stuff that you've done. So I think that maybe like you mentioned books, maybe in books about game designs, you know, in 10 years, they will have a section of like Nauticrawl like.
I think if it does make it to a book, it's gonna be like how to not approach this business, and there's gonna be now to grow like chances of failure very
So the thing
high.
you have to do from now on is to pay people to start using Nauticrawl like as a term and make sure that
Oh God, please! I don't wanna. The last thing that I want is to end up in that whole argument of is it a roguelike? Is it a roguelike, but maybe it's a roguelite. So in
Nauticrawl
Nauticrawl, we
like.
tried and stay. Yeah, we tried and stay as much as possible away from all the craziness. So I hope eventually it doesn't come to a Nauticrawl like, and people start going like, "That's not quite like Nauticrawl. It's not a Nauticrawl like."
I will
Is
totally
it?
start using it. I'm sorry, I will put it as an hashtag, you know, like I want to be the first one.
I'm kidding. I would be honored. I'm kidding.
So in the people in the chat, please start using Nauticrawl like to refer to games that have like mysterious controllers. Oh god, I think
Games that you don't understand can totally be a Nauticrawl like.
I think Santa Ragione is going to kill us. And Gareth as well. But beside that,
Okay, Garrett's experience is different.
yeah, it's a bit
Um,
different. So
yeah.
I think we've been talking about Nauticrawl for quite some time, and I know you've been working on a lot of other projects. So, you know, this is called Gamedev Graveyard. So sometimes we talk about projects that died, that somehow died.
Those are my favorite. Those are my favorite.
It's
Dead
it's
prototypes.
the vast majority of projects. You know,
Yeah,
if you
exactly.
didn't know,
That's
the games you see, they're 1% of stuff we make.
yeah.
The rest is
That's
dead.
the ugly truth. We all live in the graveyard of dead prototypes.
So you worked on something called Galumph. Do you want to talk a bit
Yeah,
about that?
yeah. So I'm still teaching for that school in Turin, and we are trying to also make a game. If that's making a game and that's it is not difficult enough. We're trying to do it while also teaching. And one of the things this place has a plenty is 2D artists. One of the things they don't have is 3D artists. So they want to make a game. How do we solve this? I was getting a lot of crappy 3D stuff. So I was like, we're not going to get anywhere with this. But the 2D art was amazing. So I thought, why don't we try Oculus Quill, which is this amazing tool for drawing in 3D. Um, there is also another application which is also amazing, which is Anim VR, which is from a friend. So there are these tools which are great for letting 2D artists draw in 3D. So I'm like, let's buy the Oculus and let's give it a shot with our 2D artists, see if they can get me 3D assets. Let's not get into the why we're trying to make a 3D game with people that don't know how to make 3D graphics. But that's the solution that comes to my mind. And they start putting up awesome stuff. They start coming up with awesome assets. They start giving me proper, not only 3D assets, but they look like 2D. I don't know if the people watching have seen or know or are familiar with Oculus Quill, but is or an in VR. Those are amazing VR applications that lets you just do strokes in 3D space. So the next thing that I want to do is try and not lock the whole production into VR because I'm a grumpy old dude. I just don't want to. I just didn't like the idea of being locked in VR. So I start coming up with a prototype of a desktop, so 2D flat application that lets you do strokes in a 3D viewport. So to do the same kind of assets that Quill can do, so that we can integrate them, maybe with other artists. that don't have the headset. That was the idea. So how do I do that? How do I draw in 3D from a 2D surface? The thing that comes to my mind is to use your tutorial on sign distance fields. And
Thank you
so
so
you are
much.
responsible for this mess. Because the next thing that happens is, so that's great. I can put clay together very quickly to form masses, and I can draw on those masses. Nowadays, we also have the brilliant grease pencil in Blender, which is fantastic. You take every tool the Blender has for 3D, and then you start painting on top of that. Back then, there was nothing like that. So the next thing that happens is I keep working on this software for a while, and the stroking paradigm, the workflow kind of sucks. It's very confusing. Quill is amazing, and in VR, amazing. My stuff, which back then was called Galumph, sucks. I mean, I can use it, I can make some interesting stuff, but nobody else can. On the other hand, the sign distance field thing that I just use as a background that never makes it to the final file is amazing. You just put two spheres together, you add a bit of blend, and you have 3D maps.
So just for the people that are watching and they're not familiar with those terms, so the traditional 3D models are done with polygons and triangles and vertices. Basically, you model a scaffolding of the object you want to do, and you have to change all the triangles. So triangles are the primitives of your 3D models, basically. But there's different ways of doing 3D graphics, and one is called SDF, sign distance functions. Basically, your primitives are not triangles, but they're mathematical equations, basically, which means that you can define stuff that is perfectly smooth. If you have a sphere, for example, if you have a 3D model of a sphere, if you zoom in, you will see it's not a sphere, but it's just a lot of triangles. So there's a point at which you will see that he has like a corner, a sharp corner. If you model a sphere as a function, as a mathematical function, you can zoom in infinitely onto it, and it will always be perfect. So if you want to make very smooth geometry, SDF is the way to go compared to 3D modeling.
It's fantastic because you just literally mesh two solids together like a sphere and a prism, a torus, whatever, and they blend seamlessly. No need, for those that work with polygons, they know the pain of bringing two forms together, welding them literally, and then trying to smooth the edges, or if they are using something like a sculpting software like ZBrush, still, that makes it a bit easier, but then you have to go and do what we call retopology, which means literally putting polygons on top of that stuff. So pain doesn't leave you, basically, when you're trying to sculpt. But with sign distance fields, you have a way out of that initial pain. Problem is, doing all those per pixel calculations is very, very heavy. So at this point, I'm with this thing that I call Galumph. I don't like the stroking workflow too much. Kind of works, but it's not intuitive. On the other hand, the sign distance field workflow is fantastic. I can model stuff at light speed without polygons. So I start going into this rabbit hole, which is volumetric functions. And the next thing I know, so the first challenge when you start tackling this kind of stuff to scale it, meaning not just making something bigger, but making the whole workflow handle more primitives, more resolution, more of everything. Because when you give it to an artist, they're going to start putting more of everything. So if you were just carefully placing two spheres to just do your thing, you give it to somebody else, they're going to start choking their hundreds of spheres, if not thousands. So that leads us to Clayxels. I start researching ways to not do per pixel calculations on these beautiful mathematical functions, and I bump into voxels. And I don't just bump into voxels on a random tutorial on internet. I bump into the most evil talk, which is Alex Evans' talk on the technology behind Dreams for PS4. I say most evil because that smart dude, which is like a genius, goes on to make papers, like academic papers, scientific papers, with hand sketches, like made by a kid. And that's the paper. He gives you that. And you go like, okay, so somebody solved the problem of how to scale this technology onto something incredibly detailed. I don't know if you've seen what people are putting out with Dreams, but it's amazing. They're doing stuff that is just incredible. And so there is this paper from 2015. So basically, I'm also reading something that is very old. I believe Dreams have moved past like 3 times the technology. But I'm reading this thing, I'm looking at the hand drawings from Alex, and I'm going like, okay, so from that moment on, you have to imagine for 1 whole year, I go to bed every night and I read that paper and I fork the paper into any other paper that that paper leads to. And so I get acquainted with voxels, something that I never really looked at because voxels are blocky, and I wasn't after blocky stuff. I was after very continuous, sexy shapes. And voxels are the opposite of that. Well, it turns out that what the guys at Media Molecule have been doing is ways, and they're not the only ones. I should mention all the other people, but there are quite a few. One of the technologies that have really made this stuff shine is Oculus Medium. So again, Oculus now it's being bought by Adobe. So there have been some research. It's all about finding your way, and one thing leads to another. I start learning about volumetric voxels and ways to put that back into geometry so that I don't have to compute everything per pixel. And I end up with this thing that this time I make it with Unity because I know I don't have the resources to make a whole editor from scratch on my own. So I make it as a plugin for Unity. I kill Galumph. Galumph doesn't exist anymore. I think 3 people in the whole universe. Yeah. Literally 3 or 5 people in the entire world tried Galumph probably, and they hated me. And so I killed that thing, which was a standalone app. It was really cute, but it was incredibly hard to write in C++ and maintain. And I started working in Unity. I needed performance, of course, so I start studying compute shaders. I study compute shaders. I study every night. I keep reading the same paper from Dreams. And I end up with this thing that now it's called Clayxels. So basically, I ditched all the stroke hand paint workflow in favor for the volumetric workflow, which is very intuitive, and that brings us to the present. That has been sort of my side project while I do games, and it's sort of it's hard to describe, but games, for me at least, are these messy creative process that you never know how. You know when you start, you know how you want to start the project, you don't know how it's going to end up. Tools, on the other hand, are a bit more stable ground to walk. So Clayxel has been my sanity sort of space.
While you're talking, we have a video about Clayxel shooters. It's a sort of prototype minigame made by Jacob Wahlberg. So yeah. and what amazed me is that if you look at this game, it's not even a game. If you look at the prototype he made, probably in just a few days, making this in anything else than Clayxel would be madness. This would be insane. Instead, in Clayxel, it's like, okay, when I shoot things, I draw a hole, done. Yeah. So it's amazing.
I mean, I'm sure there's many talented people that could actually still make in days that kind of stuff with polygons and whatnot. The thing to understand about Clayxels is that it's sort of my dream as a game designer. I wanted something that completely removes the friction of the tool in order to get to the game. So that example is really good because of that. To do that kind of game, you should first go to Blender or Maya or Max, sculpt your meshes, then rig the meshes, scheme the meshes, which means going vertex by vertex, painting influence areas that come from these things that we call bones, that are what effectively moves the geometry. And it's literally like a skeleton inside the geometry. So then you bring that back into Unity, and then you can start coding your game. And I wanted to, I'm lazy. So
as a real programmer is.
Yeah, I'm lazy. I don't want to do all that. So I wanna jump into the game. And Clayxels is my dream way of working when making prototypes, at least. It can be pushed way further than just prototypes, but in my mind, it started as a way to prototype my own games very quickly. And I still, as of today, I still develop Clayxels for myself, mainly. It's a hard exercise because now there's more people asking for stuff. There's people complaining about stuff, of course. Whatever you do and you put it out there, there's going to be people complaining. And so sometimes I have to take a step back and remind myself that I'm making these for myself. It's doing okay on the asset store, which is great. It's generating a few bucks, which help on the anxiety and stuff. Although I'm okay doing just games, but you know it helps. But I have to remind myself that I'm doing this for myself so that I don't get tangled, because the risk otherwise is that I just do Clayxels for the rest of my life. It's one of
I
those
would love
things
that.
yeah, it's fantastic, but I still want to make games. So I'm trying to, balance my daily routine between just a bit of fixing here and there, replying to people complaining, bugs and stuff on Clayxels, and the rest of the day I'm making games because it's the thing that I like the most, and I think technology eventually dies. Games somehow last a bit longer. There is a bit more of myself into a game that I can make than just a tool. That doesn't mean that making Clayxels is not fun. It's incredibly fun, and whenever somebody like Alex, that guy doing the wholesome games sculpting with Clayxel lately, whenever I see a talented artist doing something with something that I made, a technology that I made, it's a great sensation. A bit of envy sometimes because I'm like, why I cannot do that? But with my own tool.
So while you're saying that, we're actually watching Alex videos right now. So if you're not familiar with his work, Alex Truk is a game developer and an artist. And basically he has been working on his own game called The Spirit and the Mouse. It's really lovely. If you have a chance, go look at that.
Yeah.
But for this show, he has sent us a video, a time-lapse video of him creating a super lovely character from Little Witch in the Woods, which is a game by the South Korean studio Sunny Side Up. It's part of the Wholesome Direct thing. So it's doing basically, I don't know how to call them. So it's doing all the cuties. He's doing he's doing all the characters from the games published by Wholesome Direct, as you know, is remaking them in Clayxels. And they're adorable. They're so cute. So we're watching a time lapse, and he's really, really talented. I think you can really see what people can make when they know how to do it. And what's really interesting is that Alex has used this technology for how long? Less than a month, probably. So I think that to get this good with something like Blender, oh my god, it would take years probably to get this good
Yeah,
with
Blender
Clayxels.
is a huge and is a huge beast. Of course, it's way more powerful in many other aspects, but um, it's important to mention that Alex is a damn good artist to start with, because I've also had cases, and I didn't expect that, of people that look at Alex's work. They look at these nice videos that make it look like it's just super easy, and then they come back to me going like,
It's not.
that's false advertising. That's you. I cannot do that. And I'm like, yeah, I know, dude. I cannot do that myself. And it's the tool is just the tool, and then there's the artist behind it. So I think what Clayxels is great for is just getting rid of the boring side of things, which sometimes you need, especially in a bigger production. There's no way to escape polygons and all of that. But if you're doing something just for yourself, you want to get the game out there, you want to see your model just as quickly as possible, this kind of technology is really great, and it's got a lot of potential. And that's why many artists on Dreams for PS4 are putting out some amazing stuff. They just finish work. They are good artists, but the last thing they want is keep using the clunky tools that they use for work. So they just turn on the PlayStation and they start sculpting away in Dreams. And I believe it's kind of a similar thing with Clayxels. Even though being a plugin inside Unity, it ends up being completely different. It has a whole aspect to it that is more linked to trying to make it run as fast as possible within a game. So that's the thing. Then another thing that I didn't quite expect when I put up Clayxels publicly, when I released it. People are fascinated by the idea of using this clay mass as an interactive thing in their game. While in Dreams, it serves mostly as a sculpting reference. So you sculpt your model, and then that's it. That's your model that you will use in your game. You will not start changing shape. With Clayxels being in Unity and very easy to access, people are starting to push the boundaries of what I thought the tool was for. And that's when it gets weird and interesting, because I conceived this technology to sculpt, make assets really quick, maybe level design, making platforms and stuff really quick, making archways and whatnot, bridge. And I kind of left the runtime aspect open just for the fun of it, because I thought, why not? It's there. Let's see what people... Because you have to imagine this tool, basically, you can use it in the editor. So Unity is not actually running your game, it's just the editor. So same way you create a cube and you move it around, with Clayxels, you create a cube, you're moving around, but then you create another cube, you put it next to that, and they blend. So you start sculpting. But when you hit play, that thing is live. It's just very fast because it's not moving. You can move it as a whole, and it's pretty much just like a mesh. But when you start moving the individual pieces, it will keep recomputing stuff. Gets heavier, of course, but that's where the creative process starts. As a game designer, you have to start thinking about the limitations, around the limitations. And yeah, and then stuff like that shooter happens, where there's zombies going around and then they get holes and stuff like that. But I didn't see that happening, really. I just left it there as an open possibility. I thought people were going to make more like crafting stuff, just the same way that you sculpt in the editor, you can actually sculpt in a game. So I thought people were going to come up mostly with that kind of stuff. Instead, they're using it for things that I didn't even imagine.
So for all the people that are interested, there's a link down below in the comment section. No, in the description box. How is it called? How do the famous YouTuber calls it? I don't know. The thing
I don't know.
The thing you can expand down below. There's a link.
I think that's how they call it.
there's a link to Clayxels, so you can actually get it from the asset store. If I'm correct me if I'm wrong, there's also a version on itch.io, but it's a sort of like demo version. What is the situation with
It's
that?
a demo version that has been left behind, and I wouldn't quite advise to start from there, but it's free, so it's a good starting point if you don't want to try the paid version. But the issue with that version is that it was splitting my time too much. It was becoming very hard to deploy on multiple platforms, so it's been left inevitably behind. And yeah, that's I. It hurts because I love each. If
I know.
honestly, I would happily just get everything on each and stay on each because it's fantastic. But it's also not the ideal platform just for about everything. So deploying the tool makes sense on the asset store, of course, because you download it within Unity. It notifies users when it gets updated. So at some point, I needed to pick my battles basically, and so I left the free version on each for still quite some time. I think it's still going to be there for some time, and I just kept it there as a demo, and I keep updating the one on the asset store, which is easier.
So, something that I find quite interesting is that, as you mentioned, there are a lot of new tools that are being developed and released in a way, and it sort of reduce the entry barrier for people that want to create stuff. Basically, you mentioned Dream, you mentioned Oculus Squill. I'm thinking about Tilt Brush. I'm thinking about
Yeah.
even stuff like Ray Marching Toolkit by Kevin Waters and Fernando Ramayo. All sort of tools that allows people to take their creativity and create stuff. And what I really like about those kind of approach is that it it's the same thing for me as the fact that making games shouldn't be a prerogative of game developers, of programmers only, I guess.
Yeah.
And in a way, this makes possible to for a lot of different people to create content even if they don't have the knowledge to use Blender or to use Unity itself. They can suddenly make games even if they've never done anything like that before. And I think maybe this is what people would call the democratization of game developing. Some people might call it like that, I guess. But what is your opinion on that?
We have a couple of, as far as I know, a couple of users, maybe there's more, using Clayxels from nodal softwares. I know Unity has recently also acquired one of those technologies, Bolt. Um, and yeah, anything that lowers the barrier is fantastic, as long as we are honest about where each technology lands and the shortcomings and the advantages. You take Clayxels as an example, you can create mass very quickly, but it's very hard to go finally detailed, which is the opposite of what you do with polygons. Very hard to start, but then detail comes easy, sort of. And with nodes and visual interfaces to make games, it's amazing how they can lower the barrier, but they are also dangerous in a way when they get advertised as a way to get rid of programming. I will never forget one awful chat that I had once with the owner of a company that told me, we are going to use this nodal software because this way we are not going to hire programmers and the game is going to be cheaper.
Ah!
When that happens, it's a problem because at that point, that's when you bring up the blueprint nightmares images and you show
Yeah.
people what these tools tend to grow like in a big
And
production.
I
So
don't
it's
think
like every
it's only
tool.
that. Like to me, no, I'm getting triggered now. For me, is also the fact that if you're a programmer, you tend to have maybe you tend to look for different things that an artist might not look for. Like, for example, efficiency. You know, how fast your game can run. Those are things that an artist might not be trained for, might not have studied about. And you know, and the other way around is true as well. So there are competences that you cannot replace like that.
Yeah, it's not about replacing as much as I think we live in an amazing time where a solo developer can be empowered to do exactly what he wants um, within reasonable amount of energies and time. The next iteration of Unreal is really, really trying hard on that front as well. Um, you just get all the massive library of scanned geometries and terrains, and you just mesh them together, and you have a photorealistic game, which was like unthinkable. And yet, it's gonna be there in a few months. Everyone will have that stuff. And Clayxels, anybody can just choke some volumes and hit play, and they have volumetric stuff going on, which was something that just wasn't there a few months ago. And again, Bolt integrated into Unity allows people that are not familiar with programming to express logic. Same for Blueprint in Unreal. The thing is, it's just about being honest. Um, Telling people this is great, but Clayxels is not going to give you amazing detail, and nodes are not going to scale past a certain level of complexity without driving you nuts. And that's what code is there for, and it will stay there because of that. Because code can grow to incredible complexity, and it still manages a certain level of flexibility when it needs to be understood and changed, refactored, and all of that. You can search and replace stuff. It's got some intrinsic properties that just makes it the ideal tool for growing a complex project. And yet again, nodes are just fantastic to approach logic, express logic for somebody that doesn't program. It's all about putting every tool in the right place, I think.
It's it's quite an interesting approach, I guess, to see, for example, from my point of view, how students from different backgrounds are empowered by some of those technologies. Because you know, at Goldsmith, we one thing I'm really happy about is that we have students that have studied, you know, maybe architecture, I don't know, or fine arts or literature, on top of people that have studied computing. So this really gives a very good insight into how they approach the tool. So, for example, someone with a background, with a degree in architecture, how are they going to approach Quill? How are they going to approach Dreams? How are they going to approach Tilt Brush? And this is something that I might not think about. For example, looking at how Alex is building stuff right now, I would have never thought of doing stuff like that. You can see that he has a mastery of the technique because probably has been doing this for a long time, and I think it's obvious, but it's something that I would have never imagined. I would have never thought about myself if it wasn't for seeing these. And personally, for example, is really what makes me very happy that I can work at a place where we have this intersection of a lot of different competences. Many colleges, without removing anything from them, many colleges tend to have a less diverse set of students. And I think that this is a big problem because then if all the students have, for example, a background in fine art or in programming, I think it's less likely that they will see things from a different perspective. And even from me, I'm learning so much just by seeing how
Yeah.
different students are creating different and diverse things because they have a diverse background. And I think it's something, I would not trade that for, I would hardly trade that, I would say.
ultimately that's what I've been running away from. I think the answer for the grand scheme of things, the business side of things in our industry is to specialize people into doing one thing extremely well, and that's what I ended up doing myself during my career. But it's, I think, being able to express your ideas entirely. So, in the case of a game, that means from the logic up to the art, which doesn't mean you have to be an amazing artist. There's so many examples of people just maximizing on on their skills. So it's not about spending years trying to be perfect at everything. It's mostly about maximizing what you can do through all these amazing tools that lets you just, get the job done quickly, and then you start seeing people that can draw amazing to the art, and maybe they're not great programmers, they can still make a game nowadays. And the same goes for programmers that are coming up with procedural generated art, fractals, and all that kind of stuff. ASCII characters describing entire world. I mean, there's everything, and I think that's the beauty of the indie niche. That all this cross-pollination of skills generates some really, really interesting results.
It's yeah, I think this is probably to me what makes the indie scene so fresh compared, let's say, to Steam. I open Steam and I'm like, I don't want to play any of those games, even if they're amazing. But maybe because they're
Yeah, it's
such a big budget, they don't risk that much, they don't have that.
it's a different thing. Maybe growing up, we also have less time to play those beautiful big games.
That as
We have
well.
to
That as
we
well.
have to turn on to the little experimental stuff and just get a quick fix.
So I think we've been chatting for quite some time. So there's a question.
And I can hear my dog
Yeah.
from the other room, so eventually I will have to give up
I will have to
because I
release you.
heard.
So there's a question that I keep asking to all the people that are coming on the show, and it's how many versions of Unity do you have installed on your machine?
And on that, I'm going to surprise you because I only have one.
This is a lie. This is a lie.
No, I'm kidding. I just removed all of them though, for real.
Just
I
for
was
the
going
show.
nuts. Yeah, I was going nuts. So I knew I would have disappointed you with this answer, but I was going nuts. I had too many, and at some point, I just removed all of them. I'm gonna write a big signpost, and I'm gonna go down the street shouting 2019.4 forever, and I'm gonna stick to that for the rest of my life. I'm kidding. I know I'm gonna have to install 2020 soon, but
especially if you're going to release assets. Now you're doomed. Now every
you know,
different
you know
version
when
you have
you
to install.
yeah. It's madness, but I'm keeping control for now. Like some people have been asking, like, oh, so I'm trying it with 2020. No, okay.
So I'm
Uh,
going to get Clayxel and try to run it on Unity 5, and I will send you like a bug
oh,
report. And I was like, one star, thumbs down. I was like, it doesn't.
if I see a nuclear explosion around the direction of London from here, then it means that it was you trying Clayxels on
Unity 5.
5.6 or something. I don't know. No, I just recently removed. I didn't even have 5.6. I remember playing with it a few years ago when I was working full time for other companies and dreaming of making a game of my own one day. But then, really, realistically, I've been working on 2018 and onwards. But I'm trying to not touch the betas to stay sane, because now we have 3 rendering pipelines per version. So that's enough.
That's enough.
For
One
now,
is enough.
enough is enough.
So, if people want to find you, where they can find you?
I mostly rumble on Twitter. Um, I don't know my Twitter
I
handle.
think it's
Andre
Andre G or
G.
something,
Yeah,
but
that
it's
I always.
down
Yeah, I
below.
never remember whether there's a G at the end or not, but that's where I am. Talking about my latest experiments or the latest crazy handle video games or whatever device that I bought and that I'm trying. I'm really passionate, so I tend to try to talk about anything that gets my attention at the moment. And yeah, that's what I share my work.
And again, you can find all of Andrea's contact down below in the description box. Is it called like that again? Maybe. And
But
you also have links to get Clayxel from the asset store in case you want to try. So with that being said, Andrea, really thank you so much for your time. It was a really nice chat,
thank you, Alan. It was fun.
and
And thank you for everybody that joined.
hope to talk to you soon. And for the people
Yep.
that are still here, don't go. We still have some stuff to talk about. But thank you so much, Andrea. Talk to you
Thank you.
later.
Bye, guys.
So, for all the people that are still around, I hope many of you, I just want to spend some time to introduce the guests that we're going to have next week. You know that this is the part where we do this all the time. And next week we're going to have Adam Samson. Now, I know that a lot of you probably know him already, because if you follow me for shaders, you cannot not possibly follow him for shaders. He's a very talented designer. And if you think I'm good with shaders, see the stuff he makes. He works on all of this sort of glassy, fluidy, squishy, fuzzy, volumetric goodness that I would love to do, but I have no idea where to start from. So I think it would be really interesting for me to have a chance to talk to Adam and see how he creates all of this stuff and whether or not there's a business for cool, squishy things made powered by shaders. Spoiler alert, there is. Aram has been working on a lot of projects and a lot of art exhibitions, including one at the Barbican. I had a chance to see and sort of play or interact with myself. So I think this is going to be quite an interesting talk for next week. And as always, if you have any question, feel free to leave it down below, leave it in the chat, leave it with Twitter on me, and hopefully I can ask those questions to him next week. With that being said, as always, I want to thank all the people that made the show possible. You can see here on the side some of my latest patrons. If you're not aware of that, on top of doing this show, which is quite a small thing, I also write tutorials. I write online educational content, mostly about Unity, mostly about shaders, sometimes about machine learning, sometimes about AI. I do all sort of things. I talk a lot about inverse kinematics, procedural animation, those kind of topics. If those are interesting for you, then have a look at my Patreon, have a look at my blog. There might be something that you might be interested on. I'm always working on some new tutorials. Actually, I'm always working on 15 tutorials at the same time. I don't even know how I'm still alive. I was also really happy to bring Andrea today because, as you've seen, he is a content creator as well, not just in terms of making games, but in terms of making stuff on the asset store. And one of the biggest fear and one of the reasons why I've not made anything on the asset store is indeed because I will need to install even more versions of Unity. And having written 200 tutorials already on my blog, so much of my time is spent fixing the tutorials when Unity changes something for new releases. You have no idea how much time that takes. So maybe one day I will publish something on the asset store, maybe sooner than you expect, but the idea of that amount of work is scaring me a bit. So I'm really glad that all those people on Patreon makes my life so much easier. Thank you so much for that. And on top of that, thank you not just to the people that have watched, but also to all the people that have subscribed. If you haven't done it already, please subscribe. I have a ring light, so I can say that now. I think it really makes a difference. The channel has been growing so much in the past few weeks, and this is something that I was not expecting. I think on Twitter I've sort of taking a bit, not of a break, but I'm not posting as much. Twitter is a bit too toxic lately for me. So being able to restart almost fresh, not fresh, but almost fresh on a new platform has been really nice. Thank you all the nice comment. Thank you, Matt, so much. I say your tutorials are amazing, Alan. Thank you so much. You have no idea how much work that's behind that. So it's really nice. It's really nice to hear. So with that being said, once again, thank you so much for being here tonight or today, depending on where you are. And I really hope to see you next time. Bye.